It's on a question. Elon Musk, Chinese prisoner? So I wanted to introduce this today for a number of reasons, which you'll find out. But Elon going to prison in China is/was a distinct possibility. And that's why he did not go to China for up to 3 years uh, prior to his last visit. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. Your like and comments are also greatly appreciated. It definitely influences the success of each and every show. So I wanted to do, as usual, our unusual show plan today. So there's a question that's hanging in the air. And the question is, Elon, a month or so ago, went to China for 4 days. And the question that was coming up is, China represents over a third of the cars produced by Tesla. China represents kind of the only reason Tesla stayed in business. Because as you'll recall, the issues with the Model 3 resulted in sort of financing lanes being closed for Tesla and their ability to establish, generate revenue and profit in China facilitated a whole bunch of other things like the existence of Tesla not being owned by another company. So there's a unique working relationship that developed and we think is ongoing with China, but the weather has been changing dramatically in a negative way towards business, high profile people, and billionaires in China. And it's my belief that the reason why Elon did not go to China for 3 years is that the the climate has gotten very, very frosty, in fact, brutal for domestic billionaires, and in particular, billionaires that are high profile, Alibaba, Jack Ma. Think of countless numbers of people who are not only billionaires, but represent sort of a lifestyle definition that the folks in China do not appreciate anymore, but it was the norm in the past to flaunt wealth and show off how well you've done, etc. But under President Xi, you can't be doing that anymore. That's how you end up in a re-education camp and in prison for short or fairly long periods of time. So I wanted to introduce the whole question mark of Elon Musk going to jail in China. Well, because of how important China is, I have no doubt in my mind there was a reason why he did not go to China. A, and not only did he not go to China, but he did something very creative 6 or 8 months ago, which is the head of the Chinese operations, which is 40% of production right now for Tesla, was actually moved over to the US with a couple of other staffers to operate kind of as the chief operating officer slash co-CEO of Tesla. This move strategically cuts the need for Tesla to go to China or Elon Musk to go to China to work there, but it allows better control of those operations without the need for US executives, especially Elon Musk, to have to go to China so frequently. Now, if Elon was a Chinese billionaire that was based in China, he'd already be in prison. What we've seen of late, as you've seen, is that the CEO of Apple, as well as Elon, has been able to go to China and leave without being arrested. And that is the state of the situation currently. We're in a zone of clampdown that continues to become more and more intense to the point of preparing for war with China because of the direction that the Communist Party is taking in China. So I wanted to note that I don't consider myself a China expert. Esperanza is the name of the site that I've been watching numerous videos from, because he lived in China for 14 years and has been reviewing some of the goings on there, particularly the shift in attitude of the Communist Party. So we're at an interesting zone right now. I've spent probably 30 hours over the last 6 months learning more about China, where it is and where it's going. And there's this very interesting thing going on, as you've seen lately. There's a lot of sort of Chinese moves to try to control all the countries that are in the Southeast Asia area, and willingness to try to engage uh, the US almost in war in the process of fully establishing control to that entire region. One of the things that, so there are a lot of data points that are rolling around. I'm more inclined to orientate my data points towards, well, what's going to happen to Tesla in this environment? But what I'm also thinking is that the environment could really change at any point. Just to review, as you know, the Chinese were interested in EVs, but they ran into a problem because they were using Tesla's patents to create as many as 100 different EV companies in China. After those companies were created, they found that the quality of products was so low that a lot of consumers did not want to do business with those companies. So that's one of the reasons why they helped Tesla to open up in China. After that opening, I just thought it was really interesting the difference between Elon's plans and the plans of the Chinese government. What Elon's plan was to build a new factory in 4 different places in China, allowing them to service the country in an efficient fashion. The reality is there's only one factory. Um, this isn't necessarily bad because it's efficient to have everything in one location, but I can see why Elon actually chose to try to move down that path. The reason is that um, it looks like one country that's contiguous that operates together, but it also turns out that it's more of uh, several different sort of most powerful, let's say 4 or 5 most powerful regions of the country. And if you're able to sort of open up manufacturing in each of them, the local jobs created is part of the win for the party entities that are in those areas. So it's a smart move for Tesla to try to do that, to keep the cycle time to customers from factory short. But it didn't work out because the power of the local party officials to sort of control what was going on so they can impress the leadership limited what was going to be done here. So, nope, sorry, Elon, we ain't going to go for this multiple location. You just build your cars in Shanghai greater and then ship it out to wherever it goes in China. And that allows sort of the local uh, EV manufacturers like a BYD and some of the other names that have survived sort of the, the war for the winners to be the brand of choice in other regions, and they'll try to compete with Tesla efficiently. As you know and fully expected, all the manufacturing floor plans of Tesla were and are being sort of copied and used by the Chinese government to help facilitate the success of the other manufacturing facilities. So that is what's going on here. Now, one of the things that's happening right now is that there are a lot of little details that create problems for Tesla in China. Let me give you a great one. There's a guy named Mark Mobius who is a world-class investor, made a lot of money in China and Asia, and he has a large account in Hong Kong Shanghai Bank in it's called HSBC, but it's a British bank with a charter in Shanghai. So that's where he deposited his and his firm's money. When they tried to execute that money going back to where his headquarters are, I believe in the United States, they informed him that uh, he had to provide 20 years of how he made that money before they would approve any kind of cash movement in that fashion. So The point being that it probably will move, but we don't know when, but we'll review that. Even though we have all the tax documents, et cetera, we want all this additional backup information. So think about Tesla in this situation. If you look at what Tesla's doing, production is increasing in the United States to meet needs of sort of the Americas. Now we have Germany increasing. But guess what? Elon got around the Mark Mobius problem I just described because we have cars being shipped to Canada, we have cars being shipped from China to Germany, none coming to the United States at this point. But guess what happens to the revenue that comes in at those destinations? That revenue can stay in country, but its ability to have that revenue come back to the United States or wherever Tesla wants it to go is unlimited once it's out of China. Once it stays in China, there's a whole bunch of issues for you can show some great revenue and profit numbers, but that money ain't leaving the country because we're having some currency deficit issues going on for China, and large amounts of money aren't going to be allowed to move around with ease, not because you didn't earn the money legally, but just because it, it, um, it's, you know, it has a greater impact when the money stays in country versus if it leaves. So, as you know, there's a long list of unique to China issues when it comes to Tesla. The most notable one is the fact that all the data on your vehicle, if you're a Tesla owner, rolls up to Tesla's computers, let's say in Silicon Valley. It's a distributed system, but in theory, it's at the headquarters of Tesla that they have control of that data. And that data is being rolled up globally. The one place that's not the case is China's new rules, where any data rolled up by those vehicles has to stay within a data center within China. So there is a gradual step-by-step process towards a Tesla in China that doesn't have the freedom to operate the way it does in other places. And this is part of the sort of China conundrum and what's going to happen. So I believe that Tesla has done a good job of sort of insulating itself from problems because, but there's still a battle, there's a challenge lurking. What happens when China says, hey, that money ain't leaving, and we don't care if your shareholders, let's say in the United States or globally, want payouts based on that Tesla's retaining earnings, and they're not paying out, and you're seeing the stock price driven, but those are retained earnings that are not being paid, but they are able to use that capital in-house to grow the company. So one of the things, the main reasons I chose to show today, and Tesla's moving very quickly, with stories popping up all the time that one has to address is Secretary Blinken has gone to China to have talks with the foreign minister as well as President Xi. And as I've been getting my grounding in how China really works and where China is currently, I'm amazed at the difference of perspective. So, for example, in Hong Kong, as China has gone to brutality, the Hong Kong people thought that embarrassing China on the world stage relative to their human rights processes was a great way to return the freedoms of Hong Kong to the country. Well, it's turned out that the media is carefully controlled by the Chinese government, and being embarrassed is a big issue. And what they've actually done is pretty much beat everybody up, thrown them in prison, billionaire or no. And the fact that those folks are trying to get the world stage to be a vehicle for protest has completely not worked. In fact, one of the latest things that's been revealed is that China actually has a global police force that's been sort of put out there. And one of the main goals is to identify dissidents or people making bad comments about China, kidnapping or arresting them and shipping them back to China. So you have sort of a global sort of squeeze on the globe going on by China. And I was kind of intrigued because if you're imprisoning, killing, starving all your people, what do you think they would do to, Americans or other entities that are trying to slow down sort of the control process that's going on? So for me, I just saw a show. It's called The Red Notice. There's a book written by a billionaire from China who escaped to London, and he's been sort of hiding there for a while with his son while his wife has been imprisoned because she didn't want to leave with him uh, prior to the rules becoming a lot more constrictive. So the the intrigue that I've had with all this is he had made the comment that you have to be careful how you deal with China because you kind of don't know what it's going to do. And I thought after I watched the show on 60 Minutes that I was thinking, China does whatever it wants. They have so much power that they can say and do what they want when they want. And there's no power of anybody to shape their activities. Well, something interesting happened, as you notice, with President uh, Biden's rule change relative to chips. And we're now starting to see Apple move some production to India or Vietnam. There are ways in which there are shifts in how American business is handling China. Elon's not going to China as often, so there's a lot of changes that have been occurring. And this is interesting because there was a 7% reduction in, I guess, the quarterly, uh, exchange of goods with China this past quarter, affected by the things I just described, I believe. But it turns out that we're starting to see a lot of expats leaving China now that are like Americans working there and all that other stuff. But we're also starting to see the reduction in economic activity that's shifting to Mexico or shifting to India and other places, starting to affect the job count that we're seeing in China. So I wanted to kind of run this by you because will it be another 3 years before Tesla goes to China, or I should say Elon goes to China? And the answer is, I think there's a high likelihood of it, only because if there's anger from the Chinese CCP regarding how they're being handled by the billionaire types, uh, it's an unknown deal once he goes there, what's actually going to happen. So I think it's a way smarter move to bring over the head of the plant and then, develop instructions that he can directly deliver to workers or go by and manage on his behalf. But I think it increasingly becomes risky for someone of his profile and wealth to go to certain places because it's unknown whether or not he's going to get out because the rules continue to get more and more restrictive. So I wanted to do this show today because we know Secretary Blinken is still there. And as I keep watching some of the news coverage, there's this impression of why don't we go over, have a conversation, and the conversation will help chill out so the animosity. I, um, I would say there's an interest and a shift in what's going on, but there are certain folks that only respond to sort of, I want to say, brutality. And that is, hey, if we lose millions of jobs, hey, if you bomb us, stuff like that is what's going to get these folks to behave differently. Um, Great diplomacy of making excellent arguments uh, has not seemed to work. And I think it's going to be intriguing over the next year to see where this goes, because if if the squeeze on China is tight enough relative to economic opportunity to ship goods to the rest of the world, I think that tight squeeze will result in a better negotiating position so that, if you will, the West or non-Chinese entities will be able to have a conversation with them that they can't have now because they really feel like they're in an upper hand power position. So we look forward to how this plays out. I'm glad Elon didn't go to jail and stay there. I think his value is articulated through the job creation and the increase in exports that those vehicles represent. So there's reasons why he doesn't go to jail, including the fact that he's not a Chinese citizen. But nature of benefit fits from the Chinese system is pretty huge for Tesla and Elon. As I said, the company was kept in business because of this. So we really look forward to what's the next step going to be and what happens out of China for Tesla. Just a one last note of something I learned that I thought was really impressive is that there was a senior member of the Chinese government that was tired of buying pens from non-Chinese entities. So he said, I'd like you to develop the ballpoint technology so that we could have, in essence, a Chinese pen that we can sign with at this level. So it took them 5 years to get that technology mastered so they could have that pen. I'm bringing that up because China is more of a copy of other people's technology and then, resell it at cheaper prices type place. And its R&D efforts tend not to be that great. I reference you back to the BYD conversation, before. Germany's at 250 miles of range, Tesla's at 500 miles of range on their truck, and China's still 126 miles of range. So not having that R&D infrastructure that's effective is really affecting their ability to be globally competitive as a country. And, uh, and therefore, I think there's more reasons why they need to cooperate globally in order to move the country forward, which I think is kind of a good thing. So we look forward to your comments on this. Next is our health tips. Just a reminder, I want to encourage you to do your 20 minutes of walking each day. Also, don't forget your back bends. Put your hands in the back of your back and lean backwards 10 times gently. And you want to do that standing up 3 times a day at maybe 4-hour intervals, because most of us are spending our time sitting down, sitting forward in a sitting position, and the spine actually wants to bend backwards as well as forwards. And so by giving it that relief, it'll feel healthier and your back will feel better out of the process. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lehithro, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Sarazwiche, Russian, Ni Hao Ma, Chinese. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and bye for now.